In this video, we are going to learn about HTTP authentication concept. Okay, so let's first understand what this term authentication actually means. Authenticating user identities is common practice not only for security related reasons but also to offer customizable features based on user preferences and type. Okay, now authenticating means I'm basically providing a security. Let's say if I'm running an organization and I have a website and I don't want any other person other than my employee to access that website. So in that case, what I can do is I can authenticate each of my employees. So whenever anyone wants to access that website, an authentication box will pop up. And authentication means we usually ask for username and password. So the employee can enter their respective username and password and can access that resource. In this way, I'm preventing any other person other than my employee to access the website. So this is known as authentication. But it is not only used for security related reasons, but also to offer customizable features based on user preferences and time. And even I can provide some customizable features based on the user's preferences and time. Okay, because now I know that okay, uh, I have different authentication username and password for one employee and different username and password for other employee. So on the basis of that, I can offer them customizable features based on their own preferences and time. Okay. Typically, users are prompted for username and password. As I said, so whenever they want to access any particular resource, a dialog box will be prompted which will ask for username and password, the combination of which forms a unique identifying value for that user. The HTTP protocol offers a fairly effective means for user authentication with a typical authentication scenario proceeding like this. Now, before jumping here, let's first understand what is HTTP protocol. Now, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now, protocol in easy language is also called set of instructions. Okay. Now, basically, what happens is whenever we go to any browser, let's say I'm going to Google Chrome, and now I want to access youtube.com. So I can simply type in the URL youtube.com and I will get the web page from the YouTube server. So, how this has happened? Basically, whenever I'm writing any URL, that means I'm making a request to access that resource. So that request will be sent to the server and the server will send a response to us. Now that response could be our output, right? That is the web page. So basically HTML, sorry. So basically HTTP is responsible for this request response cycle. It will send our request to the server and server will return us the output, and hence we will be able to see the output. So everything happens because of HTTP. So HTTP is responsible for the request response cycle. Okay, now this HTTP protocol actually offers a fairly effective means for user authentication. Okay, so let's see how. The client requests a restricted resource. Restricted resource means not everyone will be able to access that resource. Now, that resource could be anything. It can be a website, it can be an application, anything. Okay. The server responds to this request. Let's say if the client request for this request, let's say if the client request for this resource. So the server responds to this request with a 401 error 401, which is called unauthorized access. So that this number basically says that this is an unauthorized access response message. The browser recognizes this response and produces a pop-up. So basically browser will pop up so that user can enter their credentials, that is the username and password for authentication. Okay, now all modern browsers are capable of understanding HTTP authentication. Okay, so every browser, like we have Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox, Internet Explorer. Okay, everyone will be able to understand HTTP authentication and offer appropriate capabilities, including Internet Explorer, Netscape Navigator, Mozilla Firefox, and Opera. So even these browsers support HTTP authentication. Means whenever server will send this error 401 unauthorized access message, the browser will pop up a window wherein user will have to enter his or her credentials. Okay. So basically, authenticating means I'm basically maintaining a security for that resource, so that no any unauthorized person can access my resource. So that's why I'm authenticating my users. So basically I'm providing username and password to each user for the authentication, and whenever they want to access any resource, they can do that using their username and password. Now the user supplied credentials. Let's say now when the pop-up comes up, the user enters their credentials. Typically, a username and password are sent back to the server for validation. As I said, whenever we enter any data through a form, okay, through a login form or through a registration form, that data is validated. Validated means it is checked whether the data is in proper form and the whatever value that user has entered is correct or not. If the user supplies correct credentials, access is granted, otherwise it is denied. So it is straightforward. If the credentials are correct, that means access will be granted, otherwise it will be denied. If the user is validated, the browser stores the authentication information within its cache. Okay, now cache are the small memory. Okay, these are the small memory in our system. This cache information remains within the browser until the cache is cleared or until another 401 server response is sent to the browser. Okay, now cache are the small memory which will store the some credentials and maybe some websites that we frequently use. Let's say if every day I'm using youtube.com, so you must have noticed that youtube.com reloads much faster than other websites which I don't frequently visit. That's because youtube.com is placed in my browser's cache. Now if I clear my browser's cache, that means youtube.com and all other websites will be loaded in the same time. Okay, so cache means it makes our work much faster. Okay, so because now this works on the basis of priority. Let's say if I'm visiting a website or an let's say if I'm visiting a website frequently, means every day maybe, so the browser is basically thinking that okay, this website is very important for this user, that's why let's place this website in a cache, so that every time whenever user request to whenever the user makes the request to visit this website, it can be reloaded much fast, it can be loaded much faster. Okay, that is how. Although HTTP authentication effectively controls access to restricted resource, so it will basically control access because we have to give out username and password. If we don't, then we don't get the access to that resource. It does not secure the channel. Now, this is important, in which the authentication credentials travel. Now, let's say now this HTTP authentication will definitely restrict the control, okay, restrict the access to that resource. But it does not secure the channel in which authentication credentials travel. Let's say the window browser will pop up the window wherein I can enter my username and password for authentication. Now, when I enter the username and password, these credentials are sent to the server through a channel, right? Now, that channel is not secure because HTTP authentication does not provide any security in the channel. So, basically, any third person or hacker can monitor, or even it can change any data, right? While the data is traveling through the channel. So this might happen. So it can basically monitor my data, it can change my data, and can do various other malpractices. Okay, so let's see what happens. That is, it is possible for well positioned attacker to sniff or monitor all traffic taking place between a server and a client, and within this traffic are the unencrypted username and password. And unencrypted means, now encryptions are the now there are many encryption algorithms that we make use of so that we can provide security to the user data. Encryption basically is I'm taking the details from my user and I'm converting that details into some another form. Let's say I'm entering my username as Kevin. So that username first will be encrypted and then it will be sent to the server. Encrypted means Kevin will not be sent as it is, like Kevin. No, it will be converted into some other characters. Maybe K will be converted to some other characters, E will be converted to some other characters, and that's how. Means, let's say if I have entered Kevin, something like this, then the through encryption, this data will be converted into anything like A, E, B, G, maybe somewhat like this, any random data. Okay, so that user cannot see what the real data is and cannot perform any malpractice. So basically, encryption is the way in which we can provide security to the user data. So even if any attacker tries to enter and sees what is the username and password, he won't be able to perform any operation because it takes much time to decrypt. Okay, when we encrypt, okay, then we have to even decrypt, right, so that we can get the original message. Okay, so it takes much time to decrypt the message. So that's why here it is written unencrypted. So if I am not encrypting, if I am sending the data as it is, that means the original data, so it will become much more easier for the attacker to maybe steal our data or to perform any malpractices with our data. To eliminate the possibility of compromise through such a method, you need to implement a secure communication channel. Okay. Now, to avoid all such possibilities of attacks and everything, we need to implement a secure communication channel, typically accomplished using secure socket layers. So this is one of the ways in which we can implement a secure communication channel. Okay. Now, secure this SSL support is available for all mainstream web servers, including Apache and Microsoft Internet Information Server. Okay, so Apache and all do support this SSL method. Okay, so through SSL, we can actually implement a secure communication channel wherein no hacker will be able to enter that channel and will be able to see what the data is and everything. Okay, because today the most important thing is security, and we have to maintain the security of our users, the details, right? So that's why we are performing all such operations. Okay, so this is all about HTTP authentication concepts. Basically, authentication in easy language is used for security related reasons. And in the next video, we will learn how to authenticate PHP variables. Means we will see or the two variables that are used for authentication in PHP. Thank you.